Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia.
At Christmas.
This better not be copyrighted. This is Bill, this is my husband, and today we are talking about... Are we talking about books or are we talking about politics? We're talking about a bit of both today, because we will be discussing this book, How to Be Right in a World Gone Wrong, by James O'Brien, which Bill has read and I have not. Last week I made the mistake of publishing a video on Brexit on my channel, which is normally about books. I was slightly overwhelmed by the response of that I got to the last video, because like I said, I'm not usually used to getting attention on my booktube channel. So we have compiled a list of examples to show how people will argue at you on the internet and in real life, and then ways of responding to people arguing at you, some of which are taken from this book.
And if you want to argue in real life with the perpetually bewildered and brainwashed, highly recommended. Useful tips in there.
Most of my viewers probably won't know who James O'Brien is, so can you tell us a little bit about him?
He's the man who sits behind that microphone on LBC. He's like the only left-wing radio presenter, talk show presenter in the world, and he has a lot of people phoning him up and telling him that he's wrong about everything.
Yes, so I don't personally listen to LBC, except when Bill puts it on in the car, and I'm not as familiar with James O'Brien. One thing that I figured out from reading bits of this book, just quotes from it, is that he's very, very good at arguing, and he does it in an impressively calm and understanding way.
He doesn't blame his listeners a great deal for thinking the way that they do. He quite rightfully blames 20 years of anti-EU propaganda from successive governments and the media. He blames the liars rather than the lied to.
The problem is that the lied to don't like admitting that they're being lied to, and that's something that I found a lot in comments on my video.
No, but he makes this point as well, that when someone has been scammed, for example, it's very, very hard for them to admit they've been scammed, even to themselves as well. So they'll vehemently defend sending all of their money to Nigeria as the right thing to do, or whatever.
One actual quote from the comment section of my last video is, "We don't need political education." Because I've been arguing that Britain has a lack of political education in schools. For example, it is not on the national curriculum. So really, in schools, you probably won't have learned about your voting system, you won't have learned about the EU, how the EU works, even how your own government and how your own houses of parliament work.
I didn't know.
No, you have to actively look up that information. Obviously, I only have the experience of growing up in Germany, and there we spent a long time looking at not just how German government works, German parliament works. We also looked at, obviously, how the EU government works and EU parliament works.
I mean, one way that we could rationalise it, if we want to be generous, is to say that it's that part of they've been conned. They don't want to admit they've been conned. If they learn stuff, then they'll realise they've been conned. Let's do Bill's Conspiracy Time.
Go on.
The government don't put political stuff in your education because they don't want you to know how terrible the system is.
I think genuinely that a lot of the political traditions in the UK are deliberately confusing. For example, if you watch BBC Parliament, there is so much tradition and decorum, and the way they use language and the way that all of these ceremonies work, that doesn't make it very accessible to your average person.
There's too much shouting for real decorum.
It's always personal.
It's entirely adversarial. Actually, just watch it on BBC Parliament. You'll see it all the time, especially Prime Minister's Questions, where it's pretty much... Theresa May won't answer questions from Jeremy Corbyn, It's questions to the Prime Minister rather than answers from. It's questions to the Prime Minister and rebukes from the Prime Minister
to the leader of the opposition.
Aimed at the leader of the opposition, Ian Blackford.
So, do you think it's part of British cultural heritage to not answer questions and instead go straight to insults? The correct response is, how fucking dare you?
I was trying to think of a good one.
That's the response that I got a lot, just straight up insults, threats, general hostility, condescension. Like, people would not actually talk about the substance of my last video and instead just go straight to, you imbecile, you're so uninformed, and then not actually then proceed to inform me. And that is what I would consider trolling, right? I think that's where it goes from just being different opinions to it not even being a discussion about opinions.
Trolling is very deliberate. It's very deliberate attempt to make someone else feel terrible. And I don't think this is that all the time. Like I
definitely some of it.
I like to follow this dude's example, Wave the Book, that he will give people the benefit of the doubt. It's that thing where, you know, the people who've been conned, whatever. In the case of people being less than cordial towards you in the comments, I will think in terms of they think they've got an argument, or that's how they've learned to argue.
So what when people tell me to bring my personal rape alarm?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously that's trolling.
Like, because I have had comments like that. I'm going to blend some in now that have got absolutely no... There's no way you can twist this into this just being someone's genuine belief.
No. Have you got a rape alarm? I got one.
Do you?
During all of this, I was having an argument on Twitter about very much the same thing. And what I found most interesting about that discussion and a number of your commenters is what we've been talking about already is just the point-blank refusal to accept facts given on a plate in front of you. Yes. My favourite comment, which I'm just repeating over and over throughout that video, go and look for it, is here are 8 sources that say immigration is good.
You just got no replies to that at all.
No, the one on Twitter, because it was a direct conversation, he rather than comments thread would reply to it and say, "Oh, it's just propaganda." Like, dude, it's 8 things from 8 different places.
Yes, like every time that I quoted a poll, someone will say, "I don't trust that poll. Yeah. That's just fake news."
This happened when I rang Nigel Farage. I rang Nigel Farage, mate of mine. He was talking about the People's Vote, and I said, "Oh, did you see the Daily Mail's polls about this? That actually people are really in favour now of having a People's Vote." And I was like, "Well, I don't really agree with how that poll was conducted." Yes. And then hung up.
There was one conversation I had with someone in the comments where I posted I
mean, sorry, it's a Daily Mail poll. If they're going to fake it, they're going to fake it the other way.
Yes. So I had
Whenever you're ready.
I had a conversation with someone.
Take your time.
Who insisted that all of the EU was going to have a massive right-wing surge in their MEPs at the next election. So I Googled it, and I found a credible source that suggested otherwise. So I posted that, and they said they don't trust the poll. Then I asked for one of their sources. They couldn't provide one. Then they said that I just see what I want to see in my preferred narrative, which was a bit ironic. And then they said this: Goodness. My narrative is recognising the truth.
It's very, very cultish, isn't
yes.
it? It's very, very cultish. It's bending the world around you to suit your narrative because you've defined yourself by that narrative. This isn't just something that you know. This is what you believe. It's even bigger. It's who you are.
It's like
fundamentally.
A religion.
Yeah.
Alternative facts.
And it's faith. And also, James O'Brien talks an awful lot about how he's arguing facts versus faith. And it doesn't always go particularly well.
But the thing is, people don't really respond to personal narratives as well. For example, in my video I talked a lot about how Brexit will affect me and my family.
Yeah.
And dozens of comments just said, "Well, I don't see why you're complaining," or "Well, why should I care?"
My
So, like,
my
you
favourite
can't
was
even rely on people's basic empathy.
my favourite was you're taking freedom of movement for granted.
And they were like, you should be grateful to have freedom of movement.
You should be grateful to have had it for a bit before I took it off you.
Yes.
Brr.
And then I listed some other rights that I take for granted, like my right to vote and to healthcare. And then they said...
Wanton ignorance, was it? Something
Yes, yes.
Because you enjoy your rights.
I know, how dare I? And also, again, how dare you? Was used quite a lot in that comment section. As if people were forced to watch my video instead of actually clicking on it.
Yeah. I was told to keep you on a lead.
Kinky. Definitely, a lot of the comments had a very misogynist undertone. Like, I'm sure if you'd done the same video, your response would have been
Very different.
maybe similarly hostile, but definitely different.
It would be hostile but not condescending in the same way.
Oh yeah. A lot of people actually didn't respond to direct questions. Like, we both asked direct questions several times.
Very good way to argue. Again, examples in the book. People will often just unravel themselves. There is a brilliant one, and I think I might find it.
Oh, shall we roleplay this?
We don't even need to. I can a little bit. All right.
I want to be the caller.
This was about a call about homosexuality.
Okay.
So I'll start with the question that James O'Brien started with. So when did you choose to be straight?
What?
It's that kind of thing. It's picking on the right question that just stops the thing making sense. So this is a good one. To be fair, they did tell you before the vote that there wouldn't be any personal financial loss.
Well, I believed there would be, and I was willing to take that sacrifice just for the independence, and so that we would control our own laws.
You know what I do now, don't you?
What's that?
I ask you which law it is you're really looking forward to not having to obey anymore.
Well, any.
That's right, any. So give me one.
The shape of your bananas? People are slightly wary of using the race argument, but the more you question it, the more it goes back to that.
Mm-hmm. And it's not always racist, to be fair. Some of it is just pick a country, Eastern European, Polish, whatever.
Hello, do you know how many times I've been called a Nazi in that comment section?
Yeah, right. It's often the explanation for it, and this is where my big conversation about immigration came up. Immigration is really good. Conspiracy. Bill's conspiracy time. The politicians who are running this country into the ground with nasty policies like austerity don't want you to know that it's them and their rich friends who are taking all of the money. They want you to think the poor people coming in from other countries, simultaneously taking all your benefits and stealing your jobs, are taking all the money, while they, the politicians and their business friends, hoard all the money. Challenge you with this. All immigration is good because the amount of money that our government would have to spend to selectively allow immigration from the EU would cost far more than what they give away in benefits to people who come to the country and take benefits.
That's the other thing. You can't move to the UK and immediately claim benefits.
I lived in Germany. I lived in Germany for 2 years. Came back to the UK because I lost my job in Germany. Couldn't get benefits. British person. Had to temporarily move in with my parents until I could find a job.
That's true.
I was 30.
So someone in the comments to my last video said, we're not going to miss her, we'll replace her with one of our own. Now, I'm currently doing a PhD, and I can think of more people doing a PhD with me that are foreigners than British people doing a PhD in the same field that I am. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I genuinely don't think you can replace us as easily as you think.
Even if, like, I am one of your own. By the way, racists. See, this idea that they said about you is the idea that they can just replace you with another person. You can't. Pick any person in your life. Can you replace them? Would you like to replace your mother? maybe. Would you like to replace your best friend?
Sorry, what was the comment? Oh yes, there were so many comments saying, you had one that said, would you leave your mother to die?
That was a really good one.
That was a really weird
Yeah.
one.
if with freedom of movement, you can move to the EU and leave your mother to die.
And I had...
You can do the same thing if you move to Nottingham.
So
And
few
services.
people actually understand
people.
how the EU works, and it's not that complicated. You can look at the Wikipedia page and it will explain it to you. But I just wanted to use this this opportunity to give a big shout out to commenter Stephen Conway, who relentlessly replied to comments with some really good, understandable, accessible, factual information about how the EU is elected and how the EU runs, only to be confronted with insults and ignorance and ignoration.
I don't even know particularly well how the EU Parliament works, but I've read a little bit, and I know enough to know that all the people coming in and saying the EU Commission is corrupt are missing the point. Because the EU Commission is still executive. It's not legislative. It doesn't pass the laws. You don't need to vote on the EU Commission any more than you need to vote on who is your civil servant or who is collecting your bins.
The concept of like legislative, executive and jurisdiction, I mean, I'm sure most British people will at least have heard of that. Because every government runs like that. Every democracy runs like that.
You actually have more of a say in your MEP than you do in your MP, largely due to, as Claudia alluded to in the previous video, the first past the post voting system, which means that once a candidate gets to 50% of the vote, they stop counting. So if you live in any safe seat, then it's likely that, and you voted for someone other than the safe seat, your vote has never counted for anything.
And the people who make up the government, the people who make up the cabinet, are people from safe seats. They don't put Boris Johnson in a, he's not even in the cabinet anymore. Like they don't put those high up important people who are going to be in the cabinet in seats that they actually have to fight for.
Like they thought Amber Rudd's seat was safe. That's why that's her seat.
The other thing is, depending on where you live in the country, you can't even vote for the party you like to vote for. We live in Wales. We do not have the option to vote Green, for example.
We also, I voted, I don't mind telling you, I voted Plaid Cymru. I'm not a Welsh nationalist.
You're not even Welsh.
No, I have no. Sorry, guys. I have no opinion on whether Wales should be independent.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't feel like it's our right to have an opinion on that
I
anyway.
I don't know. I really like our local MP, and he's really good.
Shout out to Howell Williams.
Howell Williams, my boy. This is the point, right? I voted for my local MP because he's really good on local issues and he's really good in Westminster. I've seen him in the Houses of Parliament. I looked at his voting record on issues that he voted on. I agree with this guy on so much.
Because he cares both about the local issues and the national issues.
And he's really, really solid on both. But the leader of Plaid Cymru isn't going to be Prime Minister. I haven't had a say on Prime Minister.
No.
I haven't had a say on the makeup of the Houses of
You
Parliament.
haven't had a say on the
All I've got to
opposition.
do, all I can do is pick this local guy who's not in the governing party. He's not in the opposition. He's just a really good guy.
He is one of, I believe, 4 MPs from that party.
I lived in Canterbury for 7 years, and all the time it was Conservative safe seat. Every single time I voted, my vote was thrown away.
Yes.
It did absolutely nothing.
And that, people, is why you need proportional representation.
Proportional representation means that the percentage of the votes that didn't win are also counted, and the overall percentage is taken into account when forming the Parliament, forming the Houses of Commons. So, if I didn't get the local MP that I wanted, my vote would still go towards the party that I'd voted for in order to perhaps bring in another MP.
Yes, from a list, how it usually works.
From a list,
yes.
That would be, this is effectively the German system, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's the one I know. Vaguely how it works.
A bit more complex than just.
It's not full PR. You still get local representation,
It is full PR.
Okay, but the votes aren't thrown away like they are in first past the post. The votes are collated and used to determine the makeup of the Bundesrat? Bundestag.
Yeah, the Bundesrat is like your House of Lords, except they're not just.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing. Brexiters. How do you feel about the House of Lords?
Appointed, aren't they, by the Prime Minister? Therefore, the Prime Minister basically being able to shape the second house that will pass the laws that the government draws up.
There aren't as many peerages now.
No.
But it's still all appointment.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? Well, you're telling me that the EU Commission is undemocratic.
The other thing is that the first past the post system leads to a two-party parliament. Right.
The idea is that it will lead to strong government, but we've had quite a few coalitions and hung parliaments and stuff recently.
We've had quite a few prime ministers. We've had quite a few governments. We've had quite a few cabinet reshuffles. Now, I'm not a fan.
We've had quite a few Brexit secretaries.
I'm not a fan of the mother of Germany, Angela Merkel, but she has been in power for more than half of my lifetime. Under different coalition governments.
I remember when it was John Major for ages, and then it was Tony Blair for ages.
Gordon Brown for like 2 seconds.
And then after that, it kind of went off the rails.
Yes. I would just like to point out some of the ways that we have responded to the comments. Some of them definitely more valuable and more useful. Asking questions we've already mentioned, always a good way, even just to try and understand the person that you're talking to.
You don't need to provide any. This is a really good one to do if you really don't know what you're talking about. Someone goes, the EU is corrupt!
Why?
Oh, why do you think that? But EU commissioners. Just ask questions and let things unravel as they do.
Yes. If you have the patience, you can try and actually explain things like that Stephen Conway did. Also, Tilly from Tilly's Shelf, amazing content with sources provided and stuff. But be prepared that you might not get a response, or you might just get more aggression and hostility as a response.
Yeah, but I'm right about immigration. I've got the sources to back it up. I've got the evidence right there.
Yes.
I'm right about immigration. And as soon as I post those sources that aren't anecdotal, that just say the fact about immigration, people stop talking to me. Be aware that humans are crap. We are terrible at admitting our mistakes, at admitting where we're wrong. We're terrible at listening to opposing points of views, and we're terrible at learning and just taking things on from people who think differently from how we do. We are hardwired to be really shit at it.
Yes.
Bear that in mind when you're talking to people. If they don't appear to be listening to your point of view, it's not necessarily that they are terrible people, it's just that they are people. And bear that in mind, and there's no reason to not be kind to them.
That being said, if they get on your nerves, just take the piss, because at some point it's not worth putting your own emotional energy into it. Yeah, and the other thing is, it's not like there aren't any arguments against the European Union. There's plenty of really good arguments about why the EU is bad. What I have yet to see is a good argument for why Brexit is good.
Just simply the geographical position of your country. You will rely tremendously on the EU. Like after Brexit, during Brexit, before Brexit. Tremendously. Because it's massive. It's 27 countries. But
Britain
over there.
But Britain used to rule the entire world, Bill.
Yeah, see how that does for you. The EU was formed following World War II to keep peace.
Rule Britannia.
And they are pretty keen on keeping that peace. And I think if Britain wanted to go off and try and take a bunch of other countries for themselves, as they have done in the past, I think the EU army that you're so convinced exists and is terrible would have something to say about it. The really ridiculous ones are the people who say, we're not going to pay the £39 billion. Like, dude, that's money you owe. Have you ever met a debt collector, right? They're really relentless. They will phone you. They will send millions of letters, turn up at your house. Eventually the bailiffs come and take your stuff, right? Now, instead of bailiffs, it's 27 countries with tanks. And instead of 100 quid to your gas company, it's 39 billion pounds.
British entitlement knows no borders, Bill.
They're perhaps even more dangerous than entitlement. British people, my fellow British people, my country, complacency is going to be your biggest enemy going forward. Throughout history, there have been examples where countries have just completely fallen apart and failed to function. And you know what people did just before that happened? They went to their jobs.
Is this another conspiracy time with Bill?
It's not. This isn't conspiracy. This has happened. This is documented. People just live their lives.
Yes.
And you are going to go on. You are going to go on living your lives until one day the systems on which you depend every day of your life will fall apart. They'll just disappear. They'll just fall out underneath you. But just gradually, these little things will start to disappear, you know? Maybe your phone signal's intermittent. Maybe certain websites get cut off on your internet. And then all of a sudden, you're in a police state and you've got a curfew. And you don't see it happening. It's gradual. It's like boiling a frog. Is that true?
It's not true, actually.
It's a myth, isn't it?
It's a myth. But
it's an expression.
People in the comments to my last video were quick to point out the fascist past of Germany and Italy. And my comment to that is, we learned a lesson, and it's time you learned that lesson too. And I really hope that you don't learn the lesson in the same way that we learned the lesson. Because there is a reason why political education is so big in Germany. There is a reason why the Germans are so keen on the EU and on collaborations with other countries. There's a reason why Germany doesn't glorify their past like Britain does.
This links a little bit into my last point, is that when, historically, when things get economically bad in a country, that's when populism will rise. The rise of UKIP, I don't think I'm wrong in saying that that happened mostly following the financial crash 15 years ago.
10 years ago now.
10 years ago, yeah. It's these little ways that society and the economy just kind of falls apart around you, just little by little by little by little by little. And then people start to think, oh, maybe it's the foreigners.
Yeah.
Maybe it's them immigrants.
Maybe it's the immigrants. Maybe
I don't have a job anymore. I used to have a job. I'm sure there are more brown people in my Tesco.
Yes, it's the immigrants, it's the Jews, it's the Muslims, it's the people who are not like me who get blamed.
Yeah. Which, again, the human brain, being stupid as it is fairly prone to do, and the tabloids know this. That's why they tell you these things.
Yes.
Conspiracy time again. They're all the same. They're all the same thing. It's all one big conglomerate.
I think we should finish the video there. I'm going to try and cut this down to a half-hour video.
Yeah, we're at 54 minutes now.
I don't even know what to call this. Conspiracy time with Bill.
How to be right about Brexit.
Oh, what? And spend another week deleting rape threads.
Tatty bye.
Do you know what I say at the end of my videos?
Get fucked, losers.
Thank you for watching. Bye.